Welcome, family, to another edition of Stranger Thinking Media, where we address the problems of a modern world. So stay tuned. Today's topic, death of the petrodollar. Babylon is fallen. Death of the petrodollar. Stay tuned. We have an awesome show for you today. Topics covered will be fall of the petrodollar, weaponizing the dollar, and hit with a BRICS. What could that mean? Welcome to our channel. Please like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Enjoy the show. The greatest glory in living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time. Yeah, the octopus got his tentacles on everything. So we're going to go to Matthew chapter 24, verse 37. But as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. Yeah, definitely in the end times. So fall of the petrodollar. That's going to
I
affect you
think
more
things
than
can
you
go
know.
longer than anyone thinks possible. And, what does it mean for the average consumer? I mean, look at this. What's the name of the bank? Synapse, and the Tennessee-based Evolve Bank and Trust, and Synapse was the middleman, this fintech, and they're saying that $112 million of people have been locked out, and there's a disagreement between how much money is owed to the bank through the middleman is saying, well, we don't owe that much, and then you have the CEO say, we never imagined a scenario like this could play out, that no regulator would step in and help. I guess what does it mean is that I think people have a misguided sense of safety with FDIC, with funds being insured. Look, one big bank failure and FDIC is insolvent. And when you realize that, they only have 130 or 40 billion backing 18 trillion, this could go a whole lot worse. And if you look at the bailout legislation, and read about it, it basically says that the FDIC has a couple of mandates in this when this happens, and the first is to make sure that the assets are redistributed. The depositor is uninsured general creditor, and they end up getting paid last, anything over the FDIC number. But that FDIC number of 250,000, they have up to 4 years to pay it out. And so when any of the excess would be paid out in stock of the new bank that takes over for it. People are going to dump that stock immediately because the stock doesn't pay the bill. I think it can go a whole lot worse than people imagine. Because look, the truth of it is this. All it really takes is for one bank to be bailed in, just one, because the public doesn't know what bail-ins mean. And one bank gets bailed in and people say, my God, they lost everything. And it would create a panic like you could not imagine. And it what starts out as a trickle turns into a flood. And, how could something like this happen? Well, a lot of the things that I've talked about with you and with others for 4 years is about the loss of the petrodollar status. And the demand for the dollar globally has been synthetic since the last 50 years, since 74. Everyone's had to stockpile dollars. Well, I'm sure you've already covered the fact that Saudi Arabia has agreed or decided to not re-up the petrodollar with the United States, meaning they can sell their oil in any other currency they want. And so what does that mean for the demand for the dollar? That synthetic demand is now fractured. The dollar hegemony is over. What does it mean? How fast will other countries stop accumulating dollars and accumulate other forms of currency to purchase energy? That's really the question. And what would it mean when all of those dollars come flooding home and hit our shores, creating much, much higher inflation than we're expected to receive or to deal with? And the byproduct of that spike in inflation is interest rates have to rise to compensate for it. This is not controlled by Powell, but by the market. What would the industry look like, the banking industry, at 10% interest rates? Boom, the whole thing blows up. And so now you start to see massive systemic problems where several banks are failing all at once. FDIC can't handle it. Banks are bailed in. You ask me, or I ask you, what happens then? How do people react when a dozen, 15, 20, 30 banks have failed because they're all underwater. And how about the insurance companies that are loaded with treasuries, which have done poorly in the last year and a half with the 500 basis point increase in rates? What happens when that happens, when rates spike and they start to fracture? The amount of panic, I think, would be extraordinary. So, this is the thing. I think you have to be proactive. It's like buying insurance, health insurance. No one wants to confront their own mortality. It's like buying homeowners insurance. You don't get mad when you come home after paying your home insurance premium and your house hasn't burned down. You're not upset about that, but if it did, you did the right thing. It's the same thing here. If you're not a contrarian, you're bound to be a victim when this all breaks loose. And I think the probability of it breaking loose grows by the day. But, a modern monetary theorist would want this. They would want a culling of the banks. And that's Lael Brainerd, number 2 at the White House in terms of economic advisory policy. Modern monetary theorist, Rand Point of FedNow, developed the CBDC with MIT. Well, she's really happy that we see bank consolidations. How big does the problem go? What triggers it? Well, that's anyone's guess, but I'll tell you this, I would not want to wait and find out. And that's why I tell people, one place to go is feddirect.gov or fednow.gov, I believe it is. You go directly to the U.S. government and buy treasuries of very, very, very short duration, disintermediating the banks. Because I think the banks are in trouble. And I don't know which ones or how fast or how systemic, but everything that I see around me will tell me that they're in trouble. And especially when you look at the problems with commercial real estate, which would then spill over into residential real estate, because a 4 or 3% mortgage is fantastic until you lose your job. And then what happens? So all of the assets that we value have been blown to sky high proportions with zero bound federal funds rate for the last 20 years, and easy money created distortions in asset prices. And when we see rates rise, which I think we will, because look, the rest of the world isn't buying our bonds anymore. We've proven the weaponization of the dollar is about as stupid as it can get. And now we just voted to actually confiscate Russian assets and give them to the Ukraine. I mean, that's about as dumb gets, and almost too stupid to be stupid. And so as the rest of the world buys commodities instead of treasuries, which I believe have become more valuable than the currency you purchase them with, and playing by a new set of rules, you will see rates rise, and the strain that puts on the system, the banks, the commercial real estate, the companies around it, the businesses around it, and the economy at large will start to have systemic effects and reverberate through the entire economy. Yeah, I think that this is not just centered on commercial real estate. It is a symptom of a bigger problem. And when commercial real estate blows up and the banks blow up, then what happens? And so I think you have to look 2 or 3 steps ahead. But Lena, I think it's never been more important to think differently, to be a contrarian, to think outside the box. And safety in the banks is something that is a misconception in my mind. It always never was, but it is now.
Wow, I like the way he put it. He said, what starts as a trickle becomes a flood. And so I think of Noah when I hear that. So let's go to Genesis chapter 6, verse 13. And God said unto Noah, the end of all flesh is come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So, I've had conversations with people in general. It's almost like I just walk around testing people. Hey, do you know what a CBDC is? You'd be surprised. Highly educated people that I work with every day have never heard of a CBDC. Do you know? Have you ever heard of BRICS? No. And this is very recent, like yesterday kind of thing. No, never heard of BRICS. So the American public is like so obviously this stuff is not being promoted or talked about on network news. The people are like in the dark about all this stuff, yet these things, like what he said, when those dollars start rolling back to the United States, if you're not familiar with how the monetary system works, it's always spoken about in terms of almost like maritime law, right? It's currency, like a river's current. the current of a river. So we call it currency. It changes direction at the bank, a river bank, where you're drowning in debt. Everything is about water. It's always tied to water. So it's a dynamic thing. It's not a static thing. If it ever becomes static, you're in trouble. It's like a dam. If the dam doesn't relieve some water, or if reservoirs aren't drawing off of that, I'm thinking of Lake Mead in Las Vegas. It's generally lately it's been fairly low because it's providing water to Las Vegas, all parts of California. So the levels of Lake Mead are constantly bordering on, Lake Mead at one point looked like it was disappearing. I think the reservoir level had dropped 150 feet at one point, maybe a couple of years ago or year before, whatever. Fortunately, in California, they got a lot of rain over the winter months, and so the reservoir built back up. But point being, you got to look at our monetary system kind of in that light. So what inflation during COVID, when we printed trillions of dollars, that money had to leave the United States, because if it stayed in the United States, prices would rise in proportion to the amount of money that was printed. So what you do, you sell treasuries, bonds, and this is one that people really don't get. You have to get the money out of the country. So you do stuff like, think about it. We're so willing to, like during COVID, they printed all the money, but the American people only got like $1 billion of it. The rest of that money was sent to Indonesia, Malaysia. And Americans were like upset. Wait a minute. Why are you sending out tax dollars all over the world? Well, it's not really your tax dollars. That's another story. Maybe we'll do a video on the monetary system so that people actually will have an understanding of how it works. It's not your tax dollars paying for any of this. The only thing your tax dollars do, it's like a minimum payment on a credit card. You buy something and then you make monthly payments. That's what your annual, tax goes to. Your federal income tax is going to pay down the debt, which it's not really doing. So we can get all into that. Not this video, take too long, but understand that China is dumping its treasuries. It's trying to reduce its exposure to the dollar. The dollar is currently the world reserve currency. It will lose that status. The question is when. Will it be immediate? Will it be 10 years from now? Maybe 20 years from now? It might be a slow burn. But the point is, the powers that be are very patient. Unlike Americans, these people are very patient. They got maybe 100-year plan that's being executed. And they're willing to sit there and chip away. And we don't get it. So if you're noticing all the sudden moves, especially from a military standpoint, that's because the people in power understand what's happening. And, in our case, in our tool bag, if the only tool you have is a hammer, then every problem becomes a nail. And so our military is the hammer, and we will throw our military to solve, problems that might require a chisel, what I'm saying, or a screwdriver. So we will hammer that screw rather than getting a Phillips head screwdriver and screwing it in, a wood screw. We'll hammer it in. So there's a lot going on, and people are not making the connection. But trust me, because of what's happening around the world, for instance, the global South is uniting. What that means is that would control all of the industrial raw materials. The people in power know this. We talk bad, not me, but the West has a debased view of Africa. I need for you to understand, right? Africa is the richest place on the planet. 35% of all industrial raw materials, that more than a third come from Africa. So you couldn't even build a cell phone without Africa. You couldn't build a computer without Africa. And Yahweh, only he knows that you could not build an electric car without Africa. All the cobalt, lithium, all that stuff's in Africa in mass. And so there's a scramble for Africa. Except our version of it is going with guns a-blazing. The Chinese and the Russians went in, hey, how you guys doing? Let's shake hands. Let's sit down at the table. Let's talk. So in their tool bag are many tools. Again, like I say, in our tool bag, it seems like there's only a hammer. Sometimes you have to use soft power, rather than hard power all the time. What is the old saying? You catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. Yeah, and that's what the Chinese and the Russians are doing. They're going in there with honey, doing some stuff for free, building railways for free. As it's not really free because down the road they'll ask for a favor. It's like the mafia, right? So anyway, that's what's going on in the world, and I think people need to actually pay attention because you're going to get blindsided. This is not some conspiracy theory. It will affect you, and it will affect you in a massive way. If those U.S. treasuries start rolling back, if nobody wants them, if nobody trusts the dollar as a reserve currency, and another thing, we need to stop with the sanction stuff because if that's what started this whole thing. If you're sanctioning people, which simply means, you're holding their money hostage. It's their money, but you won't let them get to it. Well, if you do that to enough countries, eventually they start talking to each other and they start saying, hey, let's develop our own system. Let's trade in our own currencies. Why? If I'm Russia, why do I have to trade with China using US dollars? And if you look at BRICS, and I suggest you get very knowledgeable about BRICS, that's what they're doing. And they're setting up their own international system, which would, by definition, just by sheer population and raw materials, start to overtake the dollar as a reserve, not a reserve currency so much as, but as an opposing monetary system. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that because I don't want to belabor it. That's for another video. I think I'll do that one because we really need to know how money is created. And I do mean created out of thin air. So we'll continue with this because there's more to follow. So just be vigilant. I suggest you have more than one bank account. Because when the banks start failing, it's a domino effect. Weaponizing the dollar.
Well, look, I mean, like I said, Jared Bernstein's thesis is to lose the world reserve status. That's first and foremost. And if you wanted to lose the world reserve status, you make a big deal about going green. You sign executive orders to do so, and then you weaponize the dollar, and not just weaponize it, but confiscate. And when I say confiscate, let's just call it what it is. It's stealing. And that's what they're doing. And you make the entire Southern Hemisphere say, my God, I mean, we're next, we're out. So much so that gold is now the second largest held in all global central bank reserves, exceeding the euro for the first time ever. And so the dollar and the euro are falling out of central bank reserves, and gold jumped to its highest level in 27 years at almost 18% reserves, if we believe the numbers that we hear. But look, this is a very, 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 very big deal.
Yes, a very big deal indeed. So second Esdras chapter 13, verse 3. And I beheld, and lo, that man waxed strong with the thousands of heaven. And when he turned his countenance to look, all the things trembled that were seen under him. They're talking about the Messiah at his second coming. I suggest you read second Esdras. It's in the apocryphal writings, and it was originally in the Bible, but politics crept in. But don't go with that narrative of, oh, it wasn't canonized. Well, technically, it was canonized by the Roman Church, and it was in King James' original issue, the 1611 version, and I believe it was the Protestants that started taking it out for some reason. There's a lot of truths in it that tell the story. A lot of historical stuff too. But yeah, we've weaponized the dollar, and a lot of people are running from it now. And again, you need to get savvy. You don't you don't know what this is going to mean. We've been sitting and we've been lethargic, banking on the, what do they call it, the backed by the good faith of the U.S. government thing, fiat currency with nothing backing it up. Well, that's about to go away. There's the faith is waning, and so fiat currency without faith, meaning people just believing in it, is valueless. So China and Russia went and started scoffing up gold from everywhere they could find it, filling up their vaults with gold, because that's what helps give currency value. And remember, currency, that paper thing you call the dollar, is not money. It's currency. There's a difference. In the Constitution, it says there's only two forms of money. Would you like to take a guess what it is? And it's not currency. No, it's gold and silver. That's the only two forms of money. Even the scriptures back that up, that gold and silver have intrinsic value. That's even scriptural. And I'm not saying that's why gold has always been valued, but as long as humans have been writing, they write about how valuable gold is, and people travel the world, genocide people to get their gold. I mean, it's crazy. That's how important gold has been from an economic standpoint throughout history. So, our currency was originally backed by gold up until 1972. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard. But the term dollar is not what you think. It's a unit of measure, a weight. So a dollar was simply a certain weight of gold. And so if you had a dollar, you used to be able to go to your bank, trade in your dollar, your piece of paper, for a certain weight of gold. You could just go to the bank, hey, I want to trade this in for gold, and they would give you gold. But what happened in 72 was that the United States got embroiled in the Vietnam War, and you need money. So they just started printing money and figuring, that's how fiat currencies work. You just don't tell people you're printing money. And if you're not paying attention, people won't realize that, hey, you have more currency than you have gold. And that once people realize that, the value of your currency now starts to shrink. And so from the inception of the Federal Reserve Bank back in 1913, prior to that, pretty much inflation and deflation were constant. It really didn't exist for the most part. But immediately upon the inception of the Federal Reserve Bank, the value of the dollar has steadily declined to where we're down to about today's dollar being only worth 3% of what the dollar was worth back in 1912. So think that through. It's only worth 3 cents today. So you could make $5,000 a year back then. That's like making $50,000. I'm just saying, I'm not doing the math, but you get the picture. So your buying power, even though you had less dollars, you could, let's look at it this way. You could buy a house back then for $1,000, a big house, right? I'm using that as an example. Today, you have to have $400,000 to buy that same house. So you have to put it all in perspective. So just, keep your eyes open. There's a lot going on. And I feel like the American people are asleep. It's time to wake. I don't mean woke. They've turned woke into a bad word. I mean, wake up. Hit with a BRICS. That's going to be.
It was just a meeting. We talked about 200 meetings, BRICS meetings leading up to the big one in October. There was just one in Novograd where 21,000 people attended from 139 nations. There were $80 billion nearly signed of bilateral deals signed on the sidelines. These are deals that are no longer using the dollar for settlement. You chip away at the dollar settlement. These countries selling treasuries and buying gold chips away at the reserve status. 59 nations, we are told, officially will plan to join the BRICS. 59. This is no longer a very small nothing burger. This is something very significant. It is encompassing the majority of human population, 3 of the 4 largest nuclear arsenals on the planet, the majority of global GDP. There was just an article, and I think it's very important that this is all put together. But there was just an article that came out by JP Morgan. And let me see if I can find it right here. I think I can, which says that China controls the majority of all of the rare earth metals. And I just want to read this really, really quick because I think it's important that we put all of this together, this whole growing group of countries put together. And it says that, bear with me, here it is. In 2020, this is from JP Morgan and their research analyst. Her name is Amy Ho. She's the global head of, she's the executive director of strategic research, and Joyce Chang, the global head of research. And it says that the current tariff announcement on the 18 billion of Chinese imports has elevated the debate on whether China's dominance in the critical mineral supply chain will emerge as the latest battleground for U.S.-China strategic competition. And I know you asked me about Saudi, but they're all tied together. China produces 68% of the world's rare earth, things like which are used for things like magnets and batteries, 70% of its graphite, which is used for lubricants, electric motors, and nuclear reactors. But the real dominance lies in the processing. China processed 100% of the world's graphite supply, 90% of the rare earths, and 74% of the cobalt. We haven't thought this out very well. And so when you realize all these countries are joining together based upon commodities, as Zoltan Pozar said, why would the Saudis want to take our currency, which we have proven we're going to choose inflation over austerity, for oil? Why would they want our bonds that have performed poorly and, more importantly, have become weaponized? And we will take them from you and even use them to fund the country you're in a war against if we don't align ideologically. So what you are seeing is something that is a lot bigger than it appears on the surface. And I think what we are seeing is a growing chorus of countries that are finding safety in numbers. And when you realize that every country in the world's had to accumulate and hold dollars literally since 1974, and this now is over, you're seeing these countries, I think, use that as motivation to accelerate this union. Now, James Rickards has an interesting take on things, and he talks about the reason we haven't seen the common settlement currency yet is because they need to have greater mass. And if indeed you have 50, 60 countries that want to do this, you now have mass. His theory is, regardless of the gold backing of the currency, which it may be. I mean, why else would gold be reclassified tier 1? Why are the central banks buying it the way they are, using the suppression of the Western market to run cover for it, the paper price in essence? But he says, look, there's 10 countries right now, and if they sell with one another, even in a common settlement currency, those 10 countries are the only ones that will accept it. So how do you go shopping if you only have 9 other countries to choose from? Well, if you have 50 or 60 countries on board, now you have 50 or 60 countries that you can buy goods and services from. You have the majority of human population, of global GDP, of military might, all of the shipping lanes and the natural resources. They are doing this very methodically. They are thinking this out very seriously. They've also officially applied to Project Enbridge. And I know you've talked about that before. I've talked about it. It came out in 2021, and Project Enbridge is a very big deal. Project Enbridge is a joint central bank digital currency cross-border payment system that was developed by China, Hong Kong, Thailand, and the United Arab Emirates. And I've been saying for a while now that I think gold and oil have been remonetized completely and totally. They are being used as money, viewed as money, more important than the dollar bills that buy them. And the first two trades that they did in 2023, their test trades that China did with this, was the first one for oil and the second one for gold, using the digital yuan and cross-border payment. Well, now you have, as of June 5th, Saudi Arabia has joined a China-dominated central bank digital currency cross-border trial in what would be another step towards less of the world's oil trade being done in dollars. The move announced by the BIS on Wednesday will see Saudi Arabia's central bank become a full participant of Project Enbridge. And at the same time, you just got the Saudi crown prince turned down an invitation today to go to the G7 meeting. So he's strengthening his ties with the BRICS, joining the Belt Road with all the other OPEC countries, joining the BRICS New Development Bank, joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, no longer selling oil just for dollars and making that very well known. Joining Project Enbridge. I mean, you can see little by little by little, they are entrenching themselves with this portion of the world that, and now they're saying we don't want to go to the G7 meeting and uses an excuse for it. You can see this is real. And what is the significance when they finally, there's a theory out there called Project Sandman. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but Project Sandman is basically, and I don't know how much veracity we put into it, but 150, 175 countries that have agreed to dump the dollar and the treasury all at the same time. When that is, what is the trigger? Don't know. But by not renewing the petrodollar deal, I would say that's a pretty damn big trigger, if you ask me.
Yeah, this is serious business, and I think Americans have to get over that, hey, we are the exceptional nation. Well, there's more to it than that. There's people in these third world countries, these up-and-coming economies, they are really hardworking people. And they work hard because there's no safety net. So if you consider yourself exceptional, that's why America is great. America has to get on the ball and compete. So right now, China is the factory of the world. And as he said in the video, they control most of the rare earth elements. And most of the rare earth elements are found in Africa. So that's something to think about. It's found in Africa, but they control it through deals with Africa. So just consider that, and this is going to be a dilemma, major dilemma. 2 Ezra chapter 13, verse 23, he that shall endure the peril in that time hath kept himself. They that be fallen into danger are such as have works and faith towards the Almighty. Know this, therefore, that they which be left behind are more blessed than they that be taken. You don't want to be taken. Forget what Hollywood is telling you. You want to be left behind. I love you all so much. Farewell. Thank you so much for continually supporting my content. If you did enjoy this video, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, and share this with your friends and family. I'm sure they'd find it interesting as well. And you might learn something. I very much appreciate you all. Shout out to the channel members. And may everybody have a beautiful and blessed day. Who's in the body of Messiah, Yahushua HaMashiach, colloquially called Jesus the Christ of Nazareth. And I'll see you all on the next video. Shalom, everyone.